Greetings everyone, warm welcome. It's an honour to have you here at the Saphira Centre of Shamanism, where we break down the ancient esoteric practices of shamanism and the occult, bringing them into balance with the deep psyche. My name is Luke, experienced practitioner and mentor of the shamanic and occult sciences. It is an honour to have you here. Thank you for joining me once again. Be sure to check out the first two links within the description of this video if you have interest in joining my membership programs. First link in the description is the Saphira Shamanic School, my premium membership service, ideal if you are wanting more in-depth and powerful occult training and initiation webinars, as well as the opportunity to work closely with me. Or if you want something more passive but still extremely powerful, then check out the Patreon, as you will gain access to lots of exclusive content, with new content uploaded multiple times each week, inclusive of powerful occult path workings, invocations, full initiatory systems, as well as powerful guidance on how you can prepare from a trauma integration perspective. You can gain access to that at just £20 per month. I look forward to seeing you over there. Today we are going to be discussing emotional suppression and how it is linked to the construction of the Qliphoth. Now, often occult initiation / occultism is seen as a separate endeavor to self-development and trauma integration, when in reality they are very much the same thing. Real occult initiation, particularly when you're looking into the darker aspects of the occult via the draconian / Qliphothic paths, we are actually working with a system which is all about emotional alchemy. Okay, it's not about power, it's not about the literal level of deification and what a lot of the left-hand path would be programming you into. It is really about softness and emotional alchemy. Okay, which means that you go into the Qliphoth to understand your separation from unity. You're going into your various layers of suppression that are controlling your life without you actually realizing it. And this is directly linked, what is held within the Qliphoth is directly linked to the process in which emotions get repressed in the body. A Qliphothic sphere / Qliphothic shell is a layer of your identity, of your predefined identity structure that has been set into motion through trauma that you have experienced. This identity structure is held together by various different protective mechanisms that have been set into motion through your early years trauma, that are there specifically to protect you from things that you have learnt are either not safe to feel, or that you have learnt are not worthy to feel within the society that you have been brought up into. So the Qliphoth is basically a map of emotional suppression, of the unmet needs that are repressed within these different identity layers that are still governing your life from the unconscious space. Okay, you're exploring what is hidden within the Qliphothic realm so that you can understand your separation from unity, so that you can work with forces like daemons that perceive themselves as separate, so that you can integrate what they represent. It's as simple as that. A common mistake is to fall into a path like the Qliphoth and approach it from the perspective of greater separation, when in reality the purpose of it is individuation and integration. So ultimately you go into the Qliphoth to understand your separation from unity, understand, feel and embrace your various repressed needs and emotions so that you can integrate them into your body and ultimately free yourself from the constraints of that suppression. Okay, doing so is going to have immense benefits to different aspects of your life. You're going to get to know yourself better. You're going to feel more whole. Your body will be flowing with greater vitality because there won't be as much repressed trauma within the body, crystallized within the body, to then impair the function of the different glands and organs. So doing this path successfully can very much liberate every aspect of your consciousness, your soul, your psyche, and your physical body. But it's important to understand that if you are to undertake this pursuit successfully, you have to understand that emotional alchemy is the core of what this process is all about. The Qliphoth is about feeling your emotions, embracing every aspect of who you are, every aspect, every perversion, every thought, every feeling, every body sensation. It's about welcoming all of it. To be successful, you have to welcome all of it and not reject any of it. If you go into a path which is as extreme as the Qliphoth and you reject your emotions, no matter what you're rejecting, if you're feeling something, thought, feeling, perversion, and you continue to reject it and separate yourself from it, you are falling into the trap of separation, and that can actually be detrimental to your health on every level and not actually beneficial. So we are going to be speaking about how emotions get suppressed within the body and how these are directly linked to the formation of our identity structures / Qliphothic shells, and how this initiatory process can liberate the suppression within the body and ultimately liberate you from the constraints of emotional suppression. Absolutely essential topic to understand, so definitely stay tuned. So it's important to realise that emotional suppression is the core problem within the collective consciousness. Everything that you see around you in terms of chaos, illness, everything like that that is getting worse and worse is the result of the repressed energy and emotions that are stuck within the body, all because our society has been completely inverted in the sense of actually directing us in the direction of dissociation instead of real integration. As I've mentioned in previous videos, a lot of systems that are detrimental or that are seen as detrimental to modern society are not actually helpful for our evolution, particularly the spiritual community and a lot of the beliefs that are flowing around the spiritual community about being in a high vibration, but also the self-help and therapeutic communities as well, being built very much off of the validation of separation. And all of this is Qliphothic programming. Okay, so when the Qliphoth goes unchecked, it basically makes you susceptible to societal level conditioning and control and causes you to normalize your trauma responses and actually fall deeper into them. All you have to do to understand how Qliphothic programming is woven into the world around you is look at the types of music that are in the mainstream, the sort of things like music videos, TV shows that are on sort of mainstream television. All of that is an indication of Qliphothic programming that is woven into the collective consciousness. The music on the radio is typically all about unmet needs within relationship dynamics, and that then resonates with the trauma of the majority of the collective, validates the trauma, and actually enforces greater separation. The same for a lot of TV shows that you see around you on mainstream TV that are basically weaving that subtle subliminal messaging that is there to reinforce your trauma responses instead of helping you to break out of them. And this extends to the spiritual community, to having to be in a space of love and light, and even in left-hand path communities whereby you journey into darkness and dark matter energy and initiation to perceive yourself more as separate from the world around you. So Qliphothic programming is everywhere. Everywhere. Okay, Qliphothic programming is anything that weaves you into greater separation. Anything that validates your separation is Qliphothic programming. All of the big spiritual teachers, the majority of the big spiritual teachers that are emphasizing the fact that, or the illusionary fact, should I say, that you need to stay positive and keep a high vibrational state. There is no bigger transmitter of Qliphothic programming and control. And what makes you susceptible to that control is your repressed emotions. Okay, the Qliphothic energy basically moves from these transmitters into your field and does not liberate you, but actually tightens the identity structure. Okay, validates the ego, validates your predefined identity that has been set into motion from traumatic experiences, and the longer somebody is exposed to this level of programming and unhealthy validation, the harder it is to break these different patterns. I've seen it happen with people close to me. I've seen it happen with different people that I've worked with. The longer somebody has been exposed to that level of societal programming, the harder it is to break, because they have had every coping strategy, every trauma response, everything like that completely validated by the programming within the world around them. Okay, many people seek out healing and seek out therapy for the validation of falsehood. And when the falsehood is validated, yes, in a sense, it does exactly what it says on the tin. It helps you to cope. It helps you to regulate your emotions, to regulate your nervous system, to do all of these different things that it says it does. But in doing so, it's detrimental to the body and to your evolution because it's working at your detriment. Okay, the Qliphoth shows you when you choose to face the energy consciously, the Qliphoth shows you that everything happens through paradox. Everything is a paradox. Okay, daemons and the alchemy that they initiate is entirely paradoxical in nature. The Qliphoth and the alchemy that the Qliphothic initiation initiates is entirely paradoxical in nature. In other words, you go into that path, it feels like you're going backwards, but in doing so, you're experiencing a paradoxical liberation. Okay, by going into the darkest and lowest aspects of yourself, the lower aspects of your psyche that are actually controlling your reality without you realizing it, when you're making friends with these different aspects of self, you are going to experience a paradoxical ascension process. And this is what is very much symbolized by the whole black light and true light of Lucifer thing that you see within the left-hand path. It's actually understanding that the real light is trapped and encased within your internal hell structure, and this hell structure is basically causing reality to be manifested in a way that is actually re-traumatizing you and therefore validating your trauma responses. And many people are not actually ready to hear this information and actually absorb this information, because the separation programming slash Qliphothic programming is too intense, and it is everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Okay, we really have to discern if we are to break free from this programming and actually start taking accountability and genuine responsibility for ourselves and actually embark on real individuation, because we have to understand that anything that is there to validate separation and see ourselves more as separate from the world around us is a trap of evolution and will keep you stuck in the same re-traumatizing loops and keep you stuck within the same re-traumatizing cycles. Whereas things that are there to actually open your heart and make you more vulnerable, which is few and far between nowadays, it is going to change. But at the moment, in the collective consciousness, it is few and far between. Those are the things that are going to help your evolution. Now, what is more destructive is when evolution, or the concept of evolution, is actually a mask for deeper levels of suppression and separation. Okay, the therapeutic community is an example of this, where it's the outer layer of healing and integration, but in reality, more separation is happening under the surface. This also happens a lot within the shamanic and occult communities, particularly the occult community, when there's a lot of focus on, say, removing unwanted entities, banishing, protection, things like that. All of these things are basically an indication that These practices are built from a place of separation and to validate falsehood. If you need to remove any external spirit or anything that you perceive as entirely outside of you, you're operating from that separation consciousness without you actually realizing it. So we go into the Qliphoth to understand our separation from unity. I'll say that again. We go into the Qliphoth to understand our separation from unity, to retrieve missing aspects of ourselves, in other words, tap into exiled needs that were not met as a child, to tap into repressed emotions, and ultimately learn how to welcome them. So basically, when the Qliphoth goes unchecked, it's weaving control into the collective consciousness, okay? And the Qliphoth is only one way or one symbol of this, but basically when I say that the Qliphoth controls the world through paradox, I'm basically saying that what you're not looking at is controlling the world. The things that you are choosing not to see, the things that are within your psyche and are holding together the architecture of your entire reality. Now, where this really becomes a trap is when the identity structures that are symbolized by the Qliphothic shells are so hard-coded to the point where somebody is completely unconscious and oblivious to there even being a problem in the first place. Okay, because, okay, the state of being that I'm feeling now is everything that I am. Okay, at this moment in time, this is who I am. Okay, everything that I'm feeling consciously here and now, this is who I am. It's not who you are, okay? You cannot see aspects of yourself. This is the whole point, okay? The suppression and these identity structures that are set into motion through protective mechanisms that are there to stop you from feeling things that you learned long ago are not safe to feel are basically siloing your consciousness, okay? So what you are aware of and what you are perceiving is only a beam. It's like a spotlight, yeah, shining into a massive dark space. And the spotlight is only a small, very small fraction of what is actually there. So many people think, okay, so what I'm perceiving now and how I'm living my life here and now, that's absolutely fine. That's great. But then they're not looking beyond what they are able to consciously see. They're not understanding how vast their potential is, but in doing so, how vast the suppression is to actually shape the perspective that you are actually experiencing now. So the perspective that you are experiencing now, and if you're perceiving me talking in this way, the perspective that you are seeing now is only going to be what your protective mechanisms and identity structures are basically deeming as safe for you to truly feel and embody. Even the information that is being received on this topic is a threat to many false paradigms that are holding our world together. So obviously, if you are perceiving what I'm saying, you are only actually going to absorb various things that I'm saying according to how much you feel safe to absorb that information. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that emotional suppression controls the world. What we are suppressing within our body does not go away. What we are not perceiving, just because we're not perceiving something consciously anymore, does not mean it has gone away. It means that in many cases, it is taking greater root within the unconscious mind and causing more resonant experiences to flow into your reality that are there to either help you break out of that cycle and ultimately tap into the repressed energy and actually embark on individuation where you are embracing that repressed need and learning how to meet that need, or it's going to do what happens with the majority of people, and in the majority of cases, it will validate the separation and cause somebody to move into a space of greater separation. And you can imagine with years, 40 plus years of this happening, it's very, very difficult to break through. This is the whole thing. It's very, very difficult to break out of those identity structures the more hard-coded it actually is. And somebody has to be ready. you know, to undergo that sort of thing. Because when you start to break through these different identity layers, be that through Qliphothic initiation, your whole reality as you know it is going to fall apart. This is the thing. Your whole reality around you is going to fall apart in some way. It's all for your best interest. But when you're breaking these layers of suppression, then you are going to experience a paradoxical elevation in consciousness, and you're going to start perceiving the world in a way that you were not able to perceive before. You're going to start to perceive things in a way that you were not actually feeling safe to truly perceive. Okay, because everything, all of the trauma responses through our societal level programming is all normalized, and it basically gets to the point where it's so covertly and subliminally programmed to the point where we don't realize what's happening. Yeah, and that's what creates the NPC, non-playable character consciousness. Okay, just basically so much dissociation and so much repression to the point where everything is on autopilot. Okay, everything is operating from the space of this illusionary treadmill that keeps you running from your unconscious mind, that keeps you avoiding. And there's nothing more destructive when this suppression is basically masquerading as real individuation. I mentioned it before, like those stupid videos that you see on YouTube about this is Carl Jung's final warning to empaths enforcing greater separation, which is not what Carl Jung was all about by any way, by any means whatsoever. So I've explained in previous videos, and I recommend checking out my Real Emotional Alchemy video for clarity on this, but I will touch on it here. When we experience an emotion consciously that is too painful to feel, that emotion is going to basically trigger an electrical response through the body, through the nervous system, and that energy that is a part of that charge is going to start to gather within a part of the body that is resonant with that particular emotion. So, in other words, what I'm saying here is that a trigger may happen as a child through an external input, okay? An external trigger, something may happen outside of you. Say, for example, there's abuse, and then it triggers loads of pain and unmet needs that we don't know how to deal with, and needs that we have no idea how to meet ourselves. We don't even realize what's happening consciously. That pain is what triggers that emotion, and that unpleasant emotion is what triggers the suppression, because the psyche is not yet in a prepared state to be able to actually deal with that emotion constructively. So that causes that emotion to plant a seed. It moves from the conscious mind, it's too painful, so it goes into the subconscious and plants a literal seed of that unmet need. That seed is symbolic of the crystallization process that takes place within the body. This crystallization process is symbolic of the formation of a qliphothic shell. Okay, a qliphothic shell is an identity layer, a set of protective mechanisms, an automated identity layer, an automated program that is set into motion through loads of unmet needs, but then the ego's need to comprehend those unmet needs and actually start to build layers of who it thinks it is around that unmet need that took place. Okay, so the crystallized emotion, so the electrical charge takes place throughout the nervous system. The emotion begins to gather within an area of the body that is resonant with that emotion. Physically, the crystallization process takes place, and what's happening in the process is that our identity is then being structured around that unmet need. Okay, and this is the same as a qliphothic shell. Qliphothic shell is a husk that is holding pure potential within it. Okay, and this happens on every level. Okay, there will be multiple emotions, multiple unmet needs that are repressed within these shells, and these shells then form your identity, your sense of self. It forms, I like this, I don't like that, I'm Luke, I like this, I do this is who I identify with, I'm this person, I do this, I do that. And everything in life becomes a tool and a mechanism to fuel the identity that is being structured through trauma. Okay, I'll say that again. Everything in our reality, everything that we do, every motivation by default becomes a mechanism to validate the identity structures that have been built from the original trauma. This is often why people go to therapy unconsciously. This is why people seek healing. This is why people seek a magic bullet for where they are, because they simply do not know how to take accountability. So basically what happens is that these shells then store in this symbolic structure, which is the Qliphothic tree, and then every experience, unless we choose to do something about it, every experience validates the identity. Every training that we do validates the identity. Every qualification that we attain validates the identity, validates the suppression, builds upon the suppression each time. And therefore, we end up building a reality that, yes, it's not to say that it is strictly always at our evolutionary detriment, as everybody's here for a different purpose. But ultimately, we are then living a reality that is predefined by identity structures and suppression that we did not choose consciously, but it's built off of pain that we don't know how to deal with. It's as simple as that. So you can imagine the amount of times that this happens. Think of yourself as a child of being open and sensitive with no fully developed ego yet. Trauma takes place, for example, say for example, you're scapegoated as a child, you're blamed and gaslit as a child. That is ultimately going to trigger a whole share of unmet needs and emotions that you as the child, are not going to know how to deal with in that moment. Where are those emotions going to go? Okay, the external input is going to trigger the electrical charge through the nervous system. Those emotions and unmet needs are going to get trapped in the body, and they set the foundations. When they get crystallized, the foundations of who we think we are as a person, our identity layers then get structured around those unmet needs, traps that unmet need there, and then starts to fuel an illusion as to who we think we are. That's why we pull in the same re-traumatizing relationship dynamics, because we have learnt that that is reality. It could not be further from the truth. So you can imagine how many times that happens as a child, how many emotions get trapped within the body and trapped within the nervous system, how many identity structures then get established around these different unmet needs, around these different emotions. And then you have experiences as you go through adolescence, separate yourself from your innocence and go into your adult life and have experiences that then feed that suppression. So by default, the majority of the collective, it's not to say that this is wrong, the soul opts in often for these experiences, opts in for this separation, but with the ultimate goal eventually, whether it's in this lifetime, the next, or multiple lifetimes from now, to actually make the commitment to journeying back to the unity in which it derives from. So we have to experience this separation from our truth and authenticity, and you can remain in that space of separation if you want to. You can undergo trainings, courses, okay? You can become a shaman, become an occultist, and feed these identity layers, and that's what the majority of people do: become a shaman, become a therapist, become a doctor, become a lawyer. All of these things that fuel the predefined identity and predefined sense of self, and that can be what the soul wants in this lifetime. That's why the Qliphoth is not for everybody. That's why the Qliphoth is not for everybody in this lifetime, because what it's going to do is it's going to break those identities. It's going to break the identities that you have established to keep yourself safe. Who you think you are now is not the totality of your being. You are not limited to any role, mask, or label. You're not limited to being a mother. You're not limited to being the son. You're not limited to being the therapist, being the doctor, being these things. All of this is the ego's attempt to try and comprehend its existence, but in doing so, uses the trauma that has taken place in the early years as the only default data to refer to as to what its sense of self actually is. Okay, and this is difficult information for many people to hear because it's basically a big slap in the face and shows many people that the self-development work that they have done before, yes, has served them, but in many cases may have fueled greater separation. Yeah, you see it a lot in the occult community in terms of people blaming spirits, blaming energies, and scapegoating everything. You see it also in the New Age spiritual community with everything being scapegoated and everything being separated from in exchange for a high vibrational state. So when we make the decision to step into a process like the Qliphoth, we have to understand that we are going to be breaking apart these layers of suppression. You are going to change thoroughly as you go through the process. You're going to change so much as a person, so much on every level, but it comes at a cost. That transformation comes at a severe cost, and that is the falsehood. That is the illusion. That is these treadmills that you're running on for your whole life to try and escape yourself. Everything from that point on is going to require more discernment, is going to require more consciousness and the willingness to actually be open, vulnerable, and be accountable for yourself. Because nobody's coming. No God is coming to save you. No external divinity is coming to save you. No healer is going to save you. It's you. And it's only you. And the platform of integration that is the mirror of the external world. So every layer of suppression in your system forms an identity layer that stops you by default from tapping into what is underneath. So you have a choice in this lifetime. It's very much a blue pill and red pill situation. Okay. Take the red pill, and then ultimately you can shed these identity layers and commit to that constant process of seeing things as they actually are, or take the blue pill and remain an NPC. Remain an NPC operating from the same structures, live for the weekend, live for this, live for that. All of that illusion that can be at the soul's evolutionary benefit, but for many people, it's not. Yeah, for many people in this lifetime here in 2025, we are here to break the shells. We're here to break the shells of who we think we are, tap into our repressed energy, tap into our repressed trauma, and ultimately learn how to feel and embrace everything. So in order to evolve, you need to feel everything. Every perversion, every anger. No, none of this regulating your system, none of this regulating your emotions, none of that. If you feel like you need to regulate yourself, that is a parent part trying to take ownership and trying to take that sort of controlling role over your inner child. So understand that on a deeper level, okay? Trauma integration work has to be at the forefront of everything if you want to genuinely grow. And real emotional alchemy needs to be at the forefront of everything, particularly if you want to go into occult initiation. Okay, only go into this path, only step onto this path if you are willing to gradually but significantly unmake your sense of self. And so that you can understand what your soul actually is, what your true will actually is, free from the predefined protective identity layers that have been set into motion through the crystallization and suppression of emotions within your body. So what's it going to be? Are you going to use everything in the reality around you to fuel an illusionary sense of self that you think is who you are? Or are you going to do what is more difficult? Be open, vulnerable, and be willing to let the shells of suppression crack. So I'll leave you with that. I think that's everything I need to say. Be sure to hit like and subscribe if this video was helpful to you. Be sure to check out my membership programs in the first two links of the description of this video, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.